welcome. This is Cliff Baumey, another episode of Mental Health Warrior. I'm super excited today. As you can see, we got guests on again. We've been filming guests last couple of weeks, and so I'm honored to have Trigger Joe from Veterans Trash Talk. You know him. And then Rachael, she's another guest. She has an amazing story. And as she talks and it goes on, I'll share a link to an article that was done on her in New Yorker, and I hope she talks about that article. It's a very moving article that she had. And she's had a wonderful, were you in the reserves for 20 years?
I was, yes. I was in the reserves almost 21 years. 21 years,
okay. Yeah, I was Army National Guard Title 10, 34 years.
And 3 days and 27 hours. Yes.
Yeah, right. 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows that Kevin up there in the corner. I don't know if you're showing your picture right now, but he's the guy behind the scenes that makes everything work and puts it all together. So I really appreciate his hard help.
AKA my consigliere.
That's it. I love that.
Kev's my right hand, man. I wouldn't know what to do without him. Thanks for having us, though, Cliff. This is I'm really glad that that you're doing this, and it's kind of Kevin and I talked about, like, it's the common cold, PTSD. There's no cure for it.
No.
There's a way of managing the symptoms, and you've chosen to make this your mission, and it's something that needs to be talked about. So I think you're a great advocate for it. So I'm really proud to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And, just as in my show,
Rachael, there's a dog in the house. I didn't know if you knew that. I didn't know if that was your dog or just wandered in.
So the first time that Kevin and I did filming, I didn't know he had dogs. And so as we're doing the first podcast, I see his chair in the back. It's moving. It's moving. And I'm like, man, Kevin's house haunted or something? I couldn't figure out why the chair kept moving, because he was sitting just right. I couldn't see the dog. So that was kind of funny. You kind of have to laugh about that.
But now I say that when you're the Celtic warrior, you have to have a haunted house, or else you're not really Scottish. So yes, we are haunted in the Travers family.
We don't talk about haunted houses in my house, because my wife would literally pick up and move that day.
Exactly.
She will have no part of that. So, but hey, I appreciate it. What I'd like to do to kind of kick things off, Joe and Rachael, I'd like for you guys to tell a little bit of your story that you have of your life and things. And we all know my story. I spent the first 3 podcasts talking about, how I was growing up as a kid. We grew up on a farm. Rachael, I'm a little jealous about where you live at in Oklahoma, kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. I will soon be like that. My wife's going to retire in a couple of years. And, it's funny. I was telling the realtor, because we're looking at properties in Missouri. That's where I'm from, the Ozarks. And I said, if I go to the end of my driveway by the road and a car comes by in 20 minutes, I'm not far enough out. So I just want to move farther out, because I've been in the DC area for 20 years. So, not that it's bad to be around people. I just don't want to be around people. And so your property sounds really, really pretty and really nice, the way you described it in the article. I appreciate that.
You remember that song? Was real popular when I when I bought this place. I bought it sight unseen. I was still overseas in Iraq when I purchased it. And it was 45,000, 40,000 around there. And I just, had some money saved up, and I just paid cash for it. I had never seen it before. Since then, of course, it's needed a roof and about 14,000 other things. And so, and it's in a place where it's just a difficult place to live. Mother Nature does not want us to be here. She tries to kick us out every single day with different things. And so it's hard on the house too. So now I have a little bit of a loan left on it, but yeah, it was, when I was on my way, that song Boston you guys remember it? Oh, well, anyway, it was, I can't remember.
Can you sing a few bars, please? I think we need some singing.
Yeah.
Name that
Augustana. Tune. You can look it up on your own. Augustana. Anyway, I would sing that, only the town I live in is named Roston. But the words are, I think I'll go to Boston. I think I'll create a new name. And it was just really about recreating yourself. And I would just sing it, really loud, only I traded the name Boston for Roston.
Oh, there you go. But, that's your home now. That's your sanctuary. That's what your place of peace. It's one thing, and Joe was talking about, with PTSD, you got to learn how to deal with your triggers. And one of my goals with this show and this podcast and having people come on and talk is, you know, you got to have different tools in your toolbox, right? Because not one thing's going to fit, not one thing's going to help you get through the day. It's going to be multiple things, you know, and I talk about that, you know, I talk about hunting the good stuff, you know, thinking about 3 good things, you know, that military's NC training class. We get taught that if you've been in the military. I ran that program for TrashTalk for a lot of years. I believe in that program. Sadly, I think that program's just become a check in the box training for a lot of soldiers. They don't pay attention to it anymore and take it to heart. But that happens in a lot of military, right? A lot of training in the military that goes forward. But, you know, and you know, it's tough because when people ask me about PTSD and how to describe it, right, it's kind of hard. So this is what I tell them. If you can think back to the most vivid dream you've ever had in your life, the most realistic, it doesn't have to be about a traumatic event, just anything. If you're laying in bed and dreaming, you wake up the next morning, you say, oh my God, that was just a phenomenal dream or whatever, that's PTSD. The problem is that dream can come back to you and you relive that event in a second, right? So a stick could snap, you know, or to me, it smells or the worst. You know, it's a whole combination of things. And so you have to learn how to deal with that. And you know, I talk about PTSD. I wrote an article about being like a sniper, right? Because it's in your mind and they hide back there in the background. And it never comes out when good things are going on, right? And so it's just kind of lurking there in the dark. I wrote an article on this for Rally Point. And, you know, when things start getting bad, that's usually when it jumps in, right? And then you have to learn how to deal with it. And so it's tough and it's hard and it's not easy. And sometimes you have to go cry in a closet, or I go out behind the woods in my house and scream at trees. You know, I have to do something to get that out. You know, whatever it is at that moment. Yes, sir.
You know, I got to touch on, I don't know if it happened this morning for a reason, because I was coming here. But you're talking and my heart's racing. Like I'm I'm feeling it come back because this morning I was talking to my wife and I was talking about coming on here, and I just started to describe PTSD to her and how and I talked to Kevin earlier about this, when people talk about PTSD and you hear it a lot with, well, how do you defeat that? And it's like, well, that's not really the proper mindset to have with it. It's you're never going to get rid of it. Yeah. And the sooner you accept that, the quicker you can deal with it. But like my wife, she was a surgical tech. She thinks like the inside of the human body is fascinating, and I have a completely different viewpoint of it, because I've seen, torn is the only word that I can use to describe it. Human body's torn in a way that's not supposed to happen, in a way that you're not supposed to see. Yeah. And you're not trained to see that. You see it. And it's almost like a childlike in the initial, like a childlike mentality that you take on, where it's just like, well, that's weird. And you just move past it. Yeah. Like, you know, like it's, everybody's accepting it and it's normal for the moment. Yeah. And then, you know, you go out. I was talking about when we got put out in Bakuba, and I was saying how the nights that we were there, because we were there for 2 weeks and everybody knew we were there. Yeah. And we were by ourselves. It was a platoon of us. David been shot the first morning, bled like a zombie for a week because he refused medevac because he knew he wouldn't come back. And I remember telling my wife, and this is this morning, it was the nights where you're sitting there saying, man, just don't let it come when I'm sleeping, because it's coming. They know we're here. We're by ourselves. Yeah. And when you tighten someone's screws that hard to where a leaf falls and I'm sitting up and I'm getting ready to put my kid on, it's so hard to loosen those screws again. Yeah. Because you go over there and you become hardened and it becomes calcified, and they stay in place for so long that sleep was not a fun thing for me for a long time. Yeah. It wasn't restful. Yeah. I knew there was a heart racing moment coming a few times a week.
Yeah.
Because that's how they mortared us.
Yeah.
You know, we'd get mortared every single night. So there was no, when you go, I assimilated it to poking a dog with a stick for 15 months and then letting it out. And that's what coming home is like. And that's what you feel like. You know, you feel like a fucking escaped gorilla from the zoo because everyone's, you know, got the stare. And it's a really hard stigma to deal with in the beginning, especially if you're as immature as I was.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It took a long time to sculpt the way I deal with it. It's an everyday fight. Rachel's been there with me. Kevin's been there with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's an everyday thing, and it can jump up whenever.
Yeah.
It's scary when you think about how many people are going about it without hearing the advice that you have to give, or going through some kind of training or EMDR like Rachael preaches or something. If they're just going through it blind, you can't win.
And, you know, like you, I went through it, you know, back when I was having my issues in the military, you didn't talk about it, you know, so I didn't talk about it to anybody, you know, and it damn near cost me my life. You know, I got as close as to completing suicide as you can without completing. I mean, let's face it, my brother wouldn't have found me. I wouldn't be sitting here. But nights were, you know, because when I was in Iraq, you know, I ran shops at night. So we worked on helicopters at the hangars, and I was in charge of, I don't know, 74 guys at night. Well, like you said, they usually mortared us there in Balad at night. You know, we didn't get mortared much during the day, you know. So for me, sleeping is the same with you. I don't know. It's probably been so I've been going to the Intrepid Center because I have a TBI. I don't talk about that a lot, but and they really holistically have made me to the point where after all this time, and I came back from deployment in 2008, that I finally started sleeping more than 4 hours a night. You know, now I sleep 6.5 and 8 hours. And it's really odd. I don't sleep like that every night, but I would say it's getting better with each night that I sleep better. And we know that if you don't have proper sleep, that it leads into other things. And Joe, I feel your pain when you talk, and I know it's a hard thing to talk about. I go out and do speaking events, and I got the podcast, and I don't know, well, the podcast I more so talk about good things, but I'm doing speaking events. I'm not talking about mostly the happy-go-luckiest time in my life. I'm talking about the reason why you had me to come there, and it takes a toll on me, both mentally and physically. And I know that September is a busy time with me with Suicide Prevention Month, and I just you're going over and over and over, just like with PTSD, it runs in your mind over and over and over again. But now it's going over and over in my mind, and I'm talking about it over and over and over and over, which can be therapeutic to a point. And I had to learn just to stand back and take a break for myself, because that's something that when I was doing a lot of speaking events, I didn't do. And what made me realize that is I went to Korea in 2019 at the end of 2019 before COVID hit, and I did 16 events in 5 days. And I was so mentally and physically exhausted by the time I got home. I said, I can never do that again. I can't do that to myself. But I was just so driven to help people that I forgot to help myself. Right. And sometimes we get that way. And then you feel guilty about it. Like, well, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't feel this way. And that was the hardest thing for me to accept, is knowing that it was okay for me to feel that way and not feel guilty to feel that way. Yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. It's hard as, you know, and not to be chauvinistic, but I was raised old school, and I believe it's my job to take care of my wife and kids. And when you're not doing that, you know, your assumption of yourself as a man starts to go down a little bit, because that's what you were taught you should do.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to know when is the right time to take care of me and when is it okay, because you feel like I'm wasting time here. I could be doing this. There's all the, you know, because when you run a house and you got 2 kids that live full time and then one that lives 700 miles away, and you're dealing with that and everything else, it stacks up. And that's another thing about PTSD that I was talking about this morning, is it's not something that you get to say, I'm not going to deal with.
Yeah.
you don't have the luxury of that. It's like being a little kid and they tell you to clean your room, push everything to the corner for a year.
Yeah, shove it under your bed.
And then all of a sudden they show up and make you really clean your room, and it's like an avalanche. It's the same deal.
I often
Just
refer to it similarly. I would talk about it's a little like going to a restaurant every single night and then bringing home to-go meals, because you didn't finish it, and then stuffing them in your refrigerator, and you keep stuffing and you keep stuffing and you keep stuffing. And then one day when you're having a party, because it never comes at a really great time. It's just always when you're standing there at the bank and, it's like happened to me. I was just barely home. I went to the bank and there was a kill facility. A butcher facility that's right here in my town. And so I'm standing in the bank, and a guy who must have, been working that morning, they always do kills first thing in the morning, and he had blood all over his jeans. And I think for me, what happens, and all of a sudden I became incredibly enraged at this guy for showing up with blood on his jeans. I judged it, of course, and I thought, what is wrong with that guy? But nobody else had that. I think the part of that makes you feel the way you do is that you're so different. You're so totally different than the rest of the population. But I think for me, what it did was it was quiet, and it makes you replay the tape. So there's the tape, and it's in you, and then it's like you don't get a memo. It just plays, and so then you get to see it again, and by then I'm just shaking, standing in line, and then all the way to work, I'm just exhausted. It's in a matter of like 2 or 3 minutes, I'm completely feel like I have run a half marathon. And so then I'm on my way to work, and then I'm there. I'm still there. And so I'm driving, in these, like long, I drive an hour to work every single day. And now I'm thinking, it would be just so terribly easy for somebody to put an IED out here on these roads. And so little things like that, but I'm like you, smells will do it to me. They were cooking fried chicken when I was walking into that chow hall door, just barely walking in there. And so the first thing, before I even got to the door, was the smell of fried chicken. So that'll kind of take me there and play the tape. But now I know it. When I know it just on the front end, I know it. And I have been working really hard to not resist it, to see it. I've said it over and over again as kind of a holy guest. And in that way, ask it what it's here to teach me. So each time I re-see something, I go ahead and I let myself do that, even if it's only for 30 seconds. When I don't resist, it takes less time. When I'm resisting, it takes more time because I'm involving my energy in the resisting of it. When I just go ahead and say, "Oh, it's you," and talk to it a little bit and look at it almost like it's a museum exhibit, and kind of with curiosity. And that takes practice. I have really had to meditate my way to just welcoming it. It is another part of us, like you said, Joe. It is a part of us. It's now a part. We chose to stand in the gap in whatever way we did, each one of us very differently. And now it's a part of us. And probably even harder is sometimes than that particular trauma was another trauma that layered on top of my trauma, and that was our fires out here in Western Oklahoma. That created a much more, I think, open reaction. And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's my catalyst for all of the reactions that I should have been having, when I was still even overseas, because this happened in 2004. And, I don't know, I really stuffed the heck out of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe
That's fires.
go ahead.
Excuse, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna, as we say on our show, caveat off what you said. Fire is one that's very powerful for me, because I would say the closest they came to getting at least me wasn't the night I got my Purple Heart. It was when they put an incendiary IED and they buried it at the wrong distance. But it put a mushroom cloud. It was meant to burn me alive. I was the lead truck gunner.
Yeah.
And it put a mushroom cloud in between the first and second truck of fire, because it was doused in some kind of accelerant. And
Wow.
they all thought we were goners, the trucks behind us. They couldn't see us.
Yeah.
And all I remember is I was like, I know the skin on the back of my neck is burning. I remember how hot the heat was from it, and it did, none of the fire even got us. That's how, and I remember that heat from it. And then I looked up and there's a herd of goats, and our driver was like hesitant. And I remember, excuse me, I remember picking my foot up and kicking him, going, floor it. I don't care how many fucking goats you hit. Like, our truck's been hit. We're leaking all over the place. I don't know if I haven't even checked myself out yet. And I was a power lineman when I came home. And when I had not dealt with any PTSD, I was in a horrible relationship, drinking pain pills, all that. And one of the guys that went up in the bucket crossed two phases. And if anybody's seen a primary flash, anybody seen primary voltage flash before?
Yep.
Because you know how violent it is. And that whoop when it first hits.
Yep.
Well, I was standing underneath it. And all I remember is the back of my neck. I thought, man, my skin's melted. And man, damn, that one still fucking rattles me. I had to go sit in the truck for like an hour. I couldn't pull my shit together.
Yeah.
Because it was so loud and so violent and mimicked the awesomeness of the power of an IED so quickly. And I wasn't ready. There was no fucking warning. It was so fast. Excuse my language. I don't know if you guys cuss on the show.
Yeah, we cuss on my show.
Never. I never cuss. You know that.
My mother hates it. Yeah, no, I remember sitting there and I was in a place where there were no veterans. I was the youngest guy on the crew. None of them even understood the war that we were in.
Yeah.
None of them understood what I was going through in that moment, except one. There was one saving grace that I had, and his name's Ricky Funderburg. I'll never forget him. He was a scout sniper. He was in the same theater with Chris Kyle. He's a bad dude. He was also a lineman there, and he came to me and told me, he goes, hey man, he goes, just know I love you. You're like a brother to me. He goes, but you keep this up, you're going to lose all the good people in your life. Eventually they're going to get tired. You're going to have to start fighting for yourself, because right now people are going to start walking away from you. And that was when I was a power lineman there. And I was bad. It's amazing I survived that year. I did not place a whole lot of value on my life and take care of anything. But I got into a inpatient PTSD program. Ricky said it saved his life. I say the same thing about mine. That experience at the VA, for veterans out there that aren't using the VA, it is a tiring process, but the help is there. If you can stand the phone calls, the wherewithal, and going through it, if you can kick 50 doors that say no to hear one yes, you will get where you need to get with the VA. It's just persistence. But I got in that program, and I remember sitting there thinking, like, the guy told me I had to write a trauma account about my worst day over there. And the doctor was kind of effeminate. He was a little guy. And I just didn't respect him as a man to tell me to go there. I'm like, I'm not doing that for you. No. I was like, you don't understand. And he eventually called me in his office and he said, look, I understand this is difficult for you, but I didn't come knocking on your door. You came knocking on mine. Yeah. This is where the program stops for you if you don't do it. That's my final offer. And after that, man, I towed the line and respected him. I went back to being a good soldier, but it was, you know, he let me know in that moment, like, this is where the program's over for you. Pack your bags or you're doing it. So I did it. And then we had a actual funeral, because you never have a funeral for anybody over there. Not a proper one.
Right.
Or at least where we were at, we didn't get that luxury of doing it. And a luxury, but I'm saying we didn't say goodbye in that manner. It was just go back and get some because they took one of yours, and you deal with that later down the road. The mourning part. But when I went and did this funeral for the guys we lost over there, I sat in front of a room full of veterans in a church, like we were doing a funeral, and gave a speech, a eulogy for each guy. And I'll never forget that moment. It was one of the most humbling experiences. I cried through the whole fucking thing. Then they took me to Arlington, and I got to go see Justin Rollins, who died on March 5th. And I hadn't been near his body since. And just an unbelievable program. I went into it with an open mind, saying I'm going to go in and get everything they have to offer out of this because I'm here. And I did, and it probably saved me in that moment. You know, the fight's not over, but it meant the tools I got from that were incredible. The survivor's guilt was crippling. It was killing me. And that's the program that helped me to deal with that phase of this. So it's a step-by-step process, and it is, like Rachael says, a lot of work.
Yeah. You know, that's what I dealt with after, 9/11 and being in the Pentagon for the 18 hours and crawling all over. I say stuff, but I'm crawling over pieces of people, and going in, and guys standing outside the building in case the building collapsed because there's nobody else in there. And he had kids. I didn't have anybody at that time. So I would go in, and if it collapsed, he would just tell them where I was at, the FEMA High Rescue Team, because that was the only people that were there. And not to get too graphic, but the thing that messed with me the most in the Pentagon is when I would go, when the plane hit and the nose detached and act like a missile going through, right? Well, when you go, and that part of the Pentagon was the part that was renovated, right? So it had the bomb-proof glass. Pros and cons to that, because when the plane hit, if it didn't explode the glass, that made the blast go left and right. Triggering event here. When you go up to the upper levels, there were people who were deceased, but they were laying on the ground covering their head, because something happened, but all the oxygen got sucked out of the room. Then there were officers that would go into, and there were people, their skin was kind of waxy. They had no idea what happened. They would just kill instantly. And that, to this day, that messes with me completely, and we were there, 9/11, I was there, and then I went back on the 12th, and I was there until early morning of the 13th after they carried the bodies out as when we left. And I'll never, I can picture everything right now to the minus detail of the time of the clock floating in the water as I'm going down the corridor to head to the backside of the Pentagon, and it's tough. And when I went into my depression of that survivor's guilt, Joe, I imagine being able to finally mourn your friends or have that funeral to you probably felt like a big weight being lifted off your chest, right? And because there's a lot of studies that have said we need to allow these soldiers to mourn the loss of their buddies, their teammate, whomever, and they didn't let him do that. And you guys just carried on. You carry the weight and that guilt with you. You never had that closure.